My name's John Chapman. Now in this video podcast we're going to look at the challenges of international project planning. Now when we plan for one site with one organisation in the UK, then a lot of the issues that we're going to face on international travel just don't exist. And yet when we work internationally, if we're not aware of these, then we're going to find ourselves with some very real challenges on timelines, on cost and on delivery. So we'll identify a few of these for your enjoyment. So the first thing we need to look at are the working days in the week. Now of course in Western Europe we work Monday to Friday, starting on a Monday morning and going through to Friday afternoon and into the evening. And for those of us who perhaps put in more hours than this, you may work Saturdays and Sundays. But typically the working week for office workers is Monday to Friday. But that's not always the case around the world. So we're going to go to Egypt now, and they work Sunday to Thursday. Now that gives us Friday and Saturday. So Fridays are out automatically for us to try and arrange conference calls with our colleagues in Egypt. But when they're working on a Sunday, we won't be. In Saudi Arabia, the days are Saturday to Wednesday. Now again, that gives us a different challenge, because now we can only do work on Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays if we want to talk with our colleagues in Saudi Arabia. And finally, let's have a look at Saturday to Thursday. An example of this is Afghanistan. Now we've had a look at these 4 different countries, and we can identify that over this it's only actually Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday that we could consider as working days in the week where we can schedule items to talk with our colleagues around the world. So the working hours. Well, in England many of us come to work for 9 o'clock in the morning, and we may have an hour for lunch or 45 minutes and leave perhaps around 5:30, perhaps on a Friday leaving a little bit earlier. Well, that's not the case everywhere. So perhaps we've got start at 7 and work through till 2, and in hot climates they might take a break and then start again at 4 and go through to 6. Or perhaps the hours are just straight 8 AM to 4 PM. Now if we put one of our team out on site and they don't know these working times, they might arrive at 9 o'clock, and when they're thinking of turning up for work, they think they've got there on time, and actually they're an hour late. As I say, in the UK it might be just 9 to 5:30, but also in some places it's 10 AM to 6 PM. So you might have your consultant arriving on site nice and early, and they're sat there waiting to get in the office, and then they want to leave at 5 o'clock, but work doesn't finish until 6. Now the next consideration is, what do people do for lunch? So they spend the whole lunch time for an hour, so they get half an hour, or perhaps they get 2 hours. And in some places lunch is a very important part of the day, and we as a company have experience of where a 2-hour lunch is common, and it's expected that it'll be over a good meal, and then they'll go back to work in the afternoon. Now it might be that it just happens until it's over. So people don't have an obsession with time like we might have in the UK, but we go off for lunch, and that's as much a part of the working day as doing work in the office. So again, we need to understand these points when we do our international planning. Time zones. Now in projects we need to communicate, and we can't always rely on email, because there's often times when we need to have telephone conferences. So let's assume we're now going to arrange our telephone conference for 9 o'clock London time. Now it is dependent upon the time of year, whether it's Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time, as to what the time is in other countries. But for now we'll assume that it's 9 o'clock in London, and therefore it's 10 o'clock in Geneva. So that's okay, we'll get in for 9 and our colleagues in Geneva will be available at 10 to join the call. It's 11 o'clock in Athens, so it's late morning, but again that's not really a problem, because they can join the call and we'll be ready to discuss whatever it is. But what if our project has an element of work going on in Southeast Asia? Let's say it's happening in Singapore. Well, 9 o'clock London time is 4 PM Singapore time. So any decisions that we take in our conference call, they will only have perhaps an hour or 2 hours after the call to follow up on them. And finally, for our friends out in Australia, it's 6 o'clock in the evening in Melbourne, so they're some 9 hours ahead. So we may agree a series of conference call actions at 9 o'clock in the morning in London and we get on with them, but for our friends in Australia it will be the next day before they will actually start work on those points. Also, we must recognise that if it's 6 o'clock in the evening, many people will want to be going home. So our time for our conference call has to be constrained, or we ask them to put in longer hours. So our project has started and we're now into the depths of planning. Now, quite often we'll ask people when they have their annual holidays, and in the UK we know that we've got 8 public holidays. Now, for special occasions like the Queen's Jubilee in 2012, there was an additional holiday granted to many people. But in other parts of the world, they will also have holidays that we don't know about and we need to check out. Now, Wikipedia tells us that there's 11 days in France, and so we need to make provision if we're planning for work in France for when these dates are each year, so that we can identify them as non-working time. If we move around the world, then down in Thailand there's 17 days of public holidays. So we know on average there's 1.5 days every single month that people won't be working because there's a public holiday. Now, of course, we need to look at the religious holidays, and if there's Islam in the country and that's the state religion, then those holidays are observed, and they change depending upon the time of year. And if we don't understand the implications of religious holidays and public holidays, then we'd be trying to get work done and our colleagues around the world just will not be available. This, in the planning, can show that it will elongate the timelines for delivery, but at least we'll have a more practical and pragmatic timeline in place because we've understood when people are and are not working. So we've done all this good work about understanding the issues around planning, around working hours and working days. Now let's go through a worked example. So we're going to assume that we're now running a project for an oil company who've got offices in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Now, as we said earlier, we will need to plan progress conference calls because we want to talk to our colleagues and find out how things are going and not just rely upon email. And of course, these conference calls have to be when there's common working time. So we'll go through Microsoft Project and have a look at what this means when we take into account the working days for the countries that are non-UK. So now we need to bring it all together in Microsoft Project. So what we're going to do is an example for the month of September. Now, within Microsoft Project, it's possible to set working and non-working time. Now, what we normally get is Saturday and Sunday is non-working time. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is working time in the UK. Now, remember, we're going to be working with an oil company who have got offices in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia. So we're going to set the non-working time days for Egypt and Saudi Arabia for the working week and also for the public holiday. Now, what you can see in the screenshot there is that actually there's only 11 days when we work when they're working. And this is an important planning consideration. This will elongate our timelines for delivery. Decisions will take longer if they require consultation and consensus. And when going through our resourcing and our allocation of work, we need to understand that conference calls and other items that require input from everyone, there's going to be less opportunity to arrange these. My name's John Chapman. I thank you for listening to this video podcast. Please give us a call. We look forward to speaking with you soon.